Welcome back to Lafayette Returns, a historic Rockford podcast released monthly leading up to Lafayette Day at Rockford on Monday, July 28th, 2025. I'm your host, Lisa Landis-Flowers. For this episode, we are sitting down with the curator of historic Rockford, Sarah Alberico, to explore some of what Lafayette may have experienced Christmas 1824. Thank you so much for joining us, Sarah. As we're having this conversation, we're exactly 2 weeks till Christmas. And a few days after that, Yuletide arrives at historic Rockford. Coming up, we will give you all the information you need to know on how you can join us for this special Yuletide celebration. First, though, Sarah, what do we know of Lafayette's travels December 1824?
Yeah, so Christmas time in December of 1824, Lafayette was around the Maryland areas of Annapolis, Frederick, and Washington, D.C. So he was traveling through those towns, being celebrated by everyone around, and they were having him for dinners and balls. It sounds like a fabulous time. I was looking up newspaper articles that were written about his travels in December, and I came across a really great write-up from the Maryland Gazette. In this, they talk about all the things he did when he was in Annapolis. I love this one part. They are talking about a wonderful dinner that they were hosting for Lafayette ahead of Christmas time. And I just wanted to read how they wrote this. It's very, very interesting. It's really fun. It says, at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, the general and suite were conducted to the college hall, where a most sumptuous and splendid dinner had been provided by the committee of arrangements under the superintendence of Mrs. M. Robinson of this city. The ornaments and decorations which were placed in the hall preparatory to the ball were found to be equally appropriate for the dinner, and the hall, upon this occasion, presented a scene of splendor and elegance, seldom or perhaps never surpassed in this country. The dinner was truly sumptuous, and the table presented not only every delicacy to gratify the palate, but was arranged with a degree of taste and elegance which contributed to increase the temptations which it presented. The toasts which were drank upon the occasion were very appropriate. At night, a general illumination took place throughout the city, and the night being fine, it had a very pleasing effect. The lower stories of the State House were illuminated, and a variety of appropriate transparencies exhibited. So I feel like I have more questions than answers after reading that. It sounds absolutely fabulous. I don't know if you caught the part where they said, never surpassed in this country. This must have been the grandest ball of all time.
Well, we've talked in this podcast about how he was a rock star, a hero. I'm sure every town was trying to outdo the other town with their balls and sumptuous feasts.
Absolutely. And I think another part that I thought was interesting, and whether or not it's Christmas time or not, they do mention that a general illumination took place throughout the city, and then the lower stories of the State House were illuminated. So it sounds very festive for Christmas time, but I think it's just really for Lafayette's visit, even though it's around Christmas time.
And there's always so many toasts at these dinners, one after the other.
Yes. It's nonstop. Every time I read a new account of a dinner or a ball, so many different people giving toasts for him.
And this was not his first Christmas in the States.
When he was 19, he joined the Continental Army in the summer of 1777, and then he spent most of December 1777 and January 1778 with George Washington and the Continental Army troops at their winter quarters at Valley Forge. And I'm sure most of you are familiar with the winter at Valley Forge. It was very harsh winter. The Americans were ill-equipped and they were suffering, no shoes, barefoot, didn't have blankets, food was scarce. It says hundreds died after suffering from diseases. And then something that I thought was really neat, he spent his own money to help buy uniforms and muskets for his men and lived among them during the coldest part of the winter. Of course, the sad part is his wife and her family are asking him to return to France, but he remained committed to the American cause. So thinking about Valley Forge, thinking about the Revolutionary War, of course, we hearken to Edward Hand, who by the end of the American Revolution had become adjutant general to George Washington. I think that the celebrations that Lafayette attended in 1824, 1825 are somewhat similar to a Yuletide celebration that we would hold here at Rockford or any other places, Philadelphia. There's a lot of similarities I'm seeing with these balls.
Talk about Yuletide at Rockford.
We are focused on recreating what Yuletide would have been like when the Hand family lived here at historic Rockford. So we're looking at the time period between 1794 and 1805. So it's a very small little window. Dancing is very, very popular, and we are so lucky to have a volunteer period dance group here at historic Rockford, and they practice all year long. They are dressed very appropriately and accurately for the time period, and they study period dances that would have been done at this time, as well as using appropriate music. So it's always a treat to see them in action at our Yuletide events. They dance in the hallway, and it is just absolutely lovely. So that is always a highlight of our Yuletide celebrations. And then, of course, we have all kinds of other things going on here as well. We have a hearth cooking group who is also volunteer, and they have a fire going in the kitchen, and they recreate recipes from the time period to show the public and talk about different ingredients and things that might have been different back then versus today. So that's always fun to see them cooking.
And I know you have some of the original receipts, as they called recipes back in the day, that were connected to the Hand family.
So we have had a very dedicated volunteer who has been able to connect everything together. And when I say that, I'm talking about the garden outside, what a family of this social status would be serving. Also, you have to look at the seasons, what's in season, and then you also have to look at their culture. They are an English family, so their foods might be more English-leaning, not maybe as German or as French as some other households. But also, if the cook was German, maybe she would throw in a few new dishes. Occasionally, I've heard that before, so we don't actually know. But this volunteer we have, she recreates faux food for our dining room table, and it is absolutely wonderful to get that visual, that connection. So you see the real food being cooked in the kitchen. Currently, the garden has been put to bed, so you cannot go out and find all the vegetables growing in the garden right now.
I guess that's where the root cellar comes in.
Yeah,
it's storing all those root vegetables.
For the winter time. Yeah, what would they eat over the winter? So you'll get to see a lot of really fun faux food in the dining room during Yuletide. Now, I don't know if it's going to be as incredible as this ball that I read about that has never been surpassed in this country. But there was a mention in the late 1700s that Lancaster held better Yuletide balls than Philadelphia.
Really?
So I always feel like we have to live up to that, and we try to make sure everything is looking really great, and we have everything going.
For people who are not familiar with this season, so this all is occurring after Christmas Day.
Yes.
And it's leading up to 12th night.
Yeah, so January 6th is sort of, you could say, like the finale. That whole time, they're having people over, they're having dinners, they're having nights where they're dancing, and other things that were popular back then. During Yuletide, they would tell ghost stories, and we can see evidence of that as we move into the 1800s, into the Victorian era. Then when we see Dickens' Christmas Carol, we get the ghosts and those ghost stories that sort of tied into the past and what had been done around the fire during this season. Of course, lots of dancing, music. We're going to have a harpsichord. It's going to be absolutely wonderful music going throughout the house with this harpsichord player, live music in one of the parlors. So that's always a real treat. And then, of course, decorating. It looks a little different than maybe what we're used to now. So in the 1700s, early 1800s, in an English household in America, we're not going to see a Christmas tree yet. That is very prominent German Christmas tradition, and we start to see that popping up in English households when Prince Albert introduces the Christmas tree to Queen Victoria, and that really takes off and becomes super popular. So we are before that occurs, and so we will not have a Christmas tree as part of the traditional Yuletide decoration here at Rockford.
And when does Yuletide happen at Rockford?
Friday, December 27th, and that is from 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. And then we also have it both Saturday and Sunday from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. So 3 days of celebrating and dancing and music and cooking, and it's always just such a wonderful time. In fact, I was just thinking about this earlier. Yuletide at Rockford has become quite the tradition. I remember coming to Yuletide when I was a kid. I mean, it's been around. We've been doing
a long time.
Yeah. So I think it's a wonderful tradition that we have here, and we have visitors that come every year because it's part of their Christmas traditions as well. It's fun.
And where do we go for tickets and more information?
All the information about the event can be found on our website, which is pretty simple. Just www.historicrockford.org. And on there, you will also find a link to purchase tickets ahead of time for the Yuletide event. We have timed entries to try to spread out the visitors, so not everyone's coming at the exact same time and there's too many people all at once. You can choose your entry time when you're purchasing your ticket. And then if you have any questions or you need any assistance, call our office manager for any questions about ticketing. And the number is 717-392-7223.
Do you have a favorite Yuletide activity?
I think I have 3. Actually, oh boy, I said 3, but now I'm thinking I like even more.
Yeah.
I love watching the dancers. I love listening to the harpsichord music. I love watching the cooks in the kitchen. And I also love seeing the dining room decked out with all these delightful faux dishes. So I guess not one thing, but all the little things that make it special are just so fun.
And we can't wait to celebrate the Lafayette Edward Hand connection when Lafayette visits Rockford this summer.
A great tie-in is that Edward Hand was a brigade commander under the Marquis de Lafayette. So they did know each other, and they were together during the American Revolution. So I love that connection, and we're going to see that a lot in our activities next year with the celebration. Of course.
Right. Of course, Edward Hand had passed when the Marquis came for his grand tour, but he did get to meet with his daughter.
He did, yeah. So Dorothy Bryn was the Hand's second daughter, and she was living in town on King Street, and Lafayette visited with her. on his tour in 1825 to Lancaster County. So we are happy to represent that interaction and happy to host Lafayette Day for the city here at Historic Rockford.
And will kids enjoy Yuletide? You said you went when you were young. Is this for kids?
I welcome families and bring your kids along. We always have a fun scavenger hunt throughout the house. I try to mix it up every year with a different theme. So this year's theme will be different than last year's if you came last year. Fun for kids of all ages. Little kids, your parents can help you out. Older kids have fun too. And this year's scavenger hunt theme is new. I haven't done it before. So I'll keep it a surprise. You can find out when you come to the door. But then, of course, at the end, you always get a prize. The kids always have a good time. So fun for the whole family.
Well, thank you so much, Sarah. Thanks for sharing your wisdom. And we'll see you at Rockford for Yuletide.
Yes, I will be here along with all of my colleagues and Historic Rockford's fabulous volunteers. And we will be putting on a Yuletide celebration for everyone to enjoy.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Tune in next month for a brand new episode as we prepare for Lafayette's visit. For more information on Rockford's Lafayette Day, visit historicrockford.org/special-events. You'll find information on Yuletide there too. For more information on what's happening across Lancaster and Western Chester counties, visit Lafayette200pa.org. I'm Lisa Landis-Flowers. Thanks so much for listening.